All right, what's going on, everybody? It's Javon.ca, and here again for another episode of 100 Ways to Make 100K. I want to introduce you to someone by the name of Vern. Now, this was one of the first entrepreneurs that I met when I moved down to Windsor, and he completely changed my perspective. Now, he dropped a couple gems in person that I wish he dropped on the show, but he dropped a couple bangers here, and I think you're going to like him. So, ladies and gentlemen, I want to introduce you to Vern.
Hey, how you doing?
I'm absolutely fantastic.
We appreciate you chatting with us today, man.
Super.
You got a second? We could ask you a question or two?
Yeah, I got a few. Yes.
Now, what was your name?
I'm Vern, and
Vern.
I own Better Made Cabinets.
Hey, Vern. Thanks so much for taking the time. Now, do you remember the first time you made 100K in a year?
Yeah, I do. It was a very long and painful year, but I was in the cabinet industry, and I believe making the first 100K was a very exciting moment for me. It just sort of catalyzed into something interesting to follow.
So what were you doing at the time? And like you mentioned, you were in the cabinets business?
Yeah, so I manufacture kitchen cabinets, wall units, entertainment centers, and we do mid to high end products. And when I started out, it was a rough go, but making the first 100,000 was sort of the nice icing after all the work that was done.
How do you even get into something like cabinets?
Yeah, getting into the cabinet business was crazy because I just wanted to be in business. I had no idea what I wanted to do. I just wanted to be in business. I knew working for somebody was not the path I wanted to take. So I wanted to be in business, and cabinet making was sort of the way that I went. That was pretty handy. So I ended up going in that direction.
And did you just like build a cabinet? Did you... What did you do first?
Well, I went to the library and I read a lot of books. I read a lot of books because I didn't even know how to swing a hammer. The joke with my father would be all the time that I got into cabinet business, but I had no idea how to even work a hammer. But the idea was I wasn't going to work the hammer. I was going to run a business. So I hired great people, and that's what I did. I ran a business and not necessarily swung the hammer.
So if someone wants to, make their first 100K in a year, maybe in a business, maybe at working, what advice would you have for them?
Go to work, forget to come home, and there's a lot of long hours initially. Initially, there's a lot of long hours, but if you put in the time, and it's not a 9-to-5 job.
So that's really cool. Now, Vern, do you remember the first time you made 100 grand in a month?
Yeah, I recall that as well. That was a kind of got me a little bit out of the cabinet business. I was doing some other things. That was a nice moment. I did just a business transaction, and all in all, it took probably about 26 days, and there was $100,000 at the end of it.
So you got to tell us, man. You got to dive in. Like, where were you at the time? What was this transaction? If you could disclose.
It was interesting because I was sitting in a patio putting the deal together towards the end, and so that's what made it even better. We were just sitting and having a bite to eat, a couple of cocktails, and the deal went together. And there was the 100,000, and that was a nice moment as well.
Now, what type of deal was this?
It was just a real estate transaction deal.
Cool. So how did you even get into real estate?
Well, I got into real estate because I wanted to do a modern or a moderate type cabinet. So I wanted to sell it to people that own properties. One thing led to another. Then I ended up just buying the properties because I couldn't get anybody to buy into what I was trying to sell. So then I started to buy properties and do my own cabinets for my own properties. And then it just sort of, it went from there. It went from, one property to the next property, including the one that's right behind us now.
So, wow. Maybe you could tell us a little bit about this property that's right behind you now.
Yeah,
where are we right now, bro?
Yeah, this is in Windsor, Ontario. This is a property that was built in 1928. It was built by Harry Lowe, a rum runner. Paul Martin lived here. So it's got a lot of history, and I bought it in 2012. It took about 2 years to restore it, and I moved in 2014.
So now, Vern, you're not a real estate agent, are you?
No, not at all. I just sort of fell into real estate. I fell into real estate because of my other business. And then once I realized that I could do well in real estate, I just continued on. So then I believe the first year I bought about 11 properties, and I did that basically with, Better Made Cabinet funding. And it's been wonderful. It's been a wonderful ride with real estate. Real estate is definitely, it's very lucrative if done right.
So if someone came up to you and said, "Hey, Vern, I want to do real estate the right way," what does that look like to you?
Yeah, you have to be in it for the long haul. You can't just think that you're going to do a quick turnaround. And I've always purchased properties with cash value. meaning that as long as it's producing enough money to pay the taxes, pay the property fees and everything else, then that's a good investment. It's a good investment that it just financially can take care of itself.
So if someone came up to you and said, Vern, I'm interested in getting into real estate, but not as a real estate agent, what would you advise?
Yeah, I think that you need to start trying to figure out how you're going to get your first property, and that's usually the hardest part, is to get the first property, because everybody will be scared because there's this huge fear, or you think that you may not be able to pull it off. So it's getting the first property. Once you get the first property, you get to see that it's really not that overwhelming, and then you just need to progressively move from there. But you have to do it in a speedy fashion, because properties can suck you up if they're not making enough income. So buying as many as you can, whether it's getting money from your uncle, your aunt, your friends, your niece, the bank, you just do what you need to do to get the property.
Well, Vern, thanks for sharing. We appreciate that. And now maybe you could share like a little bit more about what the real estate that you have now is. So right now you mentioned there's this big monster house with all this history behind you. Do you still have those 11 original units?
No, I sold about 20 properties last year. And I was just getting out of the duplexes, triplexes. So now I focus more on commercial buildings, plazas, just stuff just a little larger. So I got rid of some of the smaller stuff because it was more work on a smaller one than something that's larger.
So Vern, do you remember the first time you made $100K in a day?
Yeah, I remember that too.
Okay, man, you got to tell us.
Yeah.
You got to dive in.
Yeah, but again, it was a real estate deal. It was we were sitting at the kitchen table, and I actually made 172,000, I believe. I remember that number because it was pretty monumental to me, and it was just like literally within an hour. Within an hour, I had 2 buildings that were for sale. I wasn't necessarily going to sell both. I was only wanted to sell one. But then a deal came across my plate, and it was a good deal. And I think even more so, I think that there's money to be had. People always talk about refinancing. They talk about refinancing. When you have property that appreciates to the point where you can actually refinance, that's the beauty of the property now. That's when it really starts to pay off. And I've refinanced property and bought other property, like to the tune of millions of dollars. Like it's just it's a phenomenal thing that can happen in real estate.
So do you think it's harder to make 100 grand in a day, or harder to make 100 grand in a year?
I think the first 100 grand is always the most difficult part. And even now, I do deals that only take me hours, or I do deals that might be going on for 2 years. So there's always this constant where sometimes it might be 2 years to make 100 grand, or it might be 2 years to make $1 million, but it's more pleasurable to make 100 grand in an hour.
I love that, Vern. Well, thank you for sharing. And one last thing before you go, if you were to meet like the 16 or like 20-year-old Vern, right? And he came up to you and said, older Vern, like, how do I do what you've done? What?
Yeah, didn't start fast enough, didn't start soon enough. And I tell family members, and I tell anybody that's, wants to hear it, that, the sooner you get started, the better. I didn't really get started till I was in my 30s. If I would have started when I was 17, 18, yeah, things would have been a whole lot different. Those 10 years would be critical.
And Vern, why do you work so hard?
Because I like to have some time off too. Yeah. So,
we appreciate you. And I know you're not really the social media guy, but is there anywhere that people could follow you if they want to learn more about your journey?
I'm on Facebook, mainly on Facebook. Yeah, you can always find me there from one company or another company, Better Made Cabinets, or vernacular, or a variety of properties that I'm doing. So I have a presence there.
What are you up to now? What are you trying to get to, if you don't mind me asking?
Well, what I'm doing now is I've always struggled, trying to finance properties. So I've always struggled trying to finance properties. So what I'm doing now is I'm helping people finance properties. So that's sort of the new thing that I'm doing now, where it takes a lot of the pressure off me. It keeps me involved in properties, but I don't necessarily have to worry about the roof. I just finance it. So that's sort of the direction that I'm going lately.
Beautiful. And Vern, thank you so much for the time. We appreciate you.
No problems.
And that sums up another episode of 100 Ways to Make 100K. Thank you so much for tuning in. Once again, I'm your host, Javon.ca, and I will see you on the next episode. Peace.